The Ocean's 11 franchise began on the 12th of December 2012, the day Grand Theft Auto Bloodgrave was originally released. It was the first Machinima KnightHunter Studios had ever put together, and, albeit in hindsight it has some flaws, the story remains fundamental to the franchise, and plays an integral part in the story of our protagonist, Niko Bellic. Grand Theft Auto Bloodgrave begins by following FIB agent Jonathan Bills, who has managed to infiltrate a terrorist cell that has embedded itself within Liberty City security firms. Whilst undercover within the cell, attempting to root out its members, the organisation discovers his true identity and burns him, framing him for a crime he did not commit, and thus he becomes wanted by both the FIB and the terrorist cell. Jonathan is tortured by Bloodgrave, who are attempting to root out the other undercover agents within their organisation. However, he manages to escape and, after a tense car chase, hides out in an abandoned FIB safehouse. After being on the run for quite some time, Jonathan is discovered by LCPD officers and is eventually arrested and transported into custody. However, en route, the convoy is ambushed by said terrorist cell and Jonathan is killed, and the terrorist cell then disappears once more. At the Bloodgrave safehouse, Mikhail Faustin, the leader of the terrorist cell, is revealed. A messenger arrives and notifies him that Jonathan has been killed, but that their assassin was arrested and is in police custody. Faustin, in an uncontrollable rage, kills the messenger and decides that they must take out their assassin before they talk. Niko Bellic, a trusted FIB investigator and soon to be an agent within the FIB's agent program, is sent to interrogate the Bloodgrave assassin. However, Bellic discovers that the people he is working closely with are, in fact, terrorist cell operatives. Bellic decides to take the initiative. He confronts his partners and, when threatened, uncovers their allegiance with Bloodgrave. Niko finds out that their mission was to lure him to an ambush site where Bloodgrave agents were to kidnap him. Bellic gets the location of the meet from them and, in self-defense, kills his two FIB partners. Sometime later, Niko travels to the ambush site and kills every Bloodgrave operative present. In response to this, Faustin and his organisation choose their next target to frame and burn, Niko himself. The assassin that killed Jonathan is released on bail and is promptly pursued by Bloodgrave assassins. A car chase leads to the assassin being taken down, framing Niko in the process for the assassin's death. Meanwhile, Niko is out having dinner with his wife, Kiki Jenkins. They discuss the future and also the difficult situation Niko has found himself in. After dropping Kiki off at home, Niko stops at a petrol station, but is then horrifically ambushed by Bloodgrave. An explosive device is detonated, blowing up the petrol station and severely injuring Niko. However, Bellic undergoes DNA replacement therapy and is soon on the way to recovery, though, of course, his entire identity has changed because of it. It is revealed that, whilst in hospital, Niko has been in FIB custody after a warrant was put out for his arrest for the murder of the Bloodgrave assassin. He has been burned. Once recovered from his injuries, Bellic is then forced to go on the run, against the agency he operates with, in order to destroy the terrorist cell that burned him. After escaping FIB custody within the hospital, he tracks a Bloodgrave operative who has known terrorist connections and kidnaps him. Whilst Niko interrogates him, the operative unveils Bloodgrave and how it is led by a notorious arms dealer, Mikhail Faustin. He also reveals how the organisation is set up to frame FIB and LCPD officers who run the risk of interfering with their terrorist and arms dealing operations. Before killing him, Niko finds out the location of where Faustin is hiding and decides to hunt him down and exact his revenge. A few days later, Niko finds Faustin. He's on the run, attempting to escape the city. A tense car chase leads them to the docks of Liberty City. Faustin attempts to escape by boat into international waters. However, after a final shootout, Niko shoots and injures Faustin, confronting him about Bloodgrave. Mikhail admits how they framed Niko, Jonathan, and all the officers who got in their way, proving Niko's innocence. Bellic, exacting his revenge, shoots and kills Faustin. The FIB and LCPD then arrive on scene, and Niko is taken into custody. In an epilogue, Niko is introduced to Claudia Angel, the director of the FIB. She apologises for what Niko went through, and states how all charges have been dropped against him. Jonathan Bills has posthumously given a medal for his bravery and commitment to the agency and the country. They discuss how Mikhail Faustin and his terrorist cell, Bloodgrave, had operatives embedded in every major security service within Liberty City, and, thanks to Niko's actions, they are making arrests and bringing the organisation to justice. Niko is awarded a position in the Agent program and is given the title Agent 11. Working alongside his new partner, Alex, or Agent 14, the two of them are then sent out to their first assignment as trusted agents of the FIB. So that's an in-depth look at the story of Bloodgrave. It certainly is a different kind of film to what we now usually do. It's the introduction of the world of Agent 11, and it's a story that explores the core beliefs of our protagonist, loyalty to the FIB, to those who are close to him, and his dedication to the country that brought him in, and also his dedication to justice and the law. The question now is, what are the major story points to take away from Bloodgrave? Well, one of the main ones, of course, is it's the introduction of Niko Bellic as an FIB agent, who is burned by Mikhail Faustin's terrorist cell and is on the run to clear his name. Then, of course, there is Niko, who has a loving relationship with his wife Kiki, and who have been married together for a number of years. There's also the fact that Niko suffered a traumatic set of injuries after an explosion at a gas station left him physically burned and scarred, which then resulted in him getting DNA replacement therapy, saving his life but changing his identity. Let's not forget as well that Alex, or Agent 14 as the Agent program dictates, is introduced as Niko's new partner, and who is a recurring character in the later films. And finally, of course, Claudia Angel is introduced as the director of the FIB, a character who would later become an integral figure in the Agent 11 franchise. So those are the main story points, of course, to take away from Bloodgrave, but what about the action? And the action is an integral part of the Agent 11 franchise. As many people know, the series has built itself on this idea of we must beat the predecessor to the film we're doing now. The action scenes must be bigger, stronger, more intense, more breathtaking, but also more experiential. We must put you in the seat. We must put you in the shootout. We must make you, the viewer, a part of the action. And you know, all of the action sequences we do today in our films, the essence of them, the very origin, came from Bloodgrave. I mean, first of all, the thing that really sets Bloodgrave apart from all the other films we've done is it's a very car chase heavy film. I mean, you have the opening car chase with the Ingot and the faction. You have Jonathan versus the police, of course, who's driving an intruder, racing around the streets of Alderney and going into Liberty City, of course. You then have the assassin and versus the Bloodgrave assassins in their photo chase, and of course then you have Niko and Faustin with the Infernus against the Sultan RS. I mean, those are just 4 car chases in one film. It was a very car chase heavy film, and there is a reason for that. It was a kind of experiment in a way. It was, what can we do in GTA 4? Again, people must remember, we didn't have the Rockstar editor back then. There wasn't any of this advanced filming tactics on the console version of GTA 4 at least. So for us it was about taking ordinary cars, taking ordinary sets and scenes and locations, and you know, mixing up a bit, seeing what we can do. And that's kind of what became kind of the action DNA of Bloodgrave. It was a very car chase heavy film. But let's not forget, it's not the only action scene that happens in the film. There's the opening foot chase with Jonathan escaping the Bloodgrave interrogators. There's the bridge ambush shootout, which is a very famous scene in terms of the DNA of the entire franchise. It's a scene that the original members who helped create that film remember vividly because it's such an iconic scene, we think. Then, of course, there's the Bloodgrave meeting shootout, Niko arriving in and engaging in a shootout with all the Bloodgrave operatives who were there to kidnap him. And then finally, of course, there's the dock shootout and Faustin's immediate death. Now, interestingly, it is a shorter film to what we now usually do. I mean, it's not a feature film. It is 40, 50 minutes. It isn't extensive. So there aren't many action scenes compared to what we now usually do. But for a film that is short, a lot definitely happens in terms of action. And the thing I find most interesting as well, looking back on it, is most car chases in the film, for instance, were completely improvised. I mean, that's not an overstatement. The way the film and the production worked was, we arrived on scene, we arrived on set that day, and we basically said, here's the start point, here's the end point, here are the cars we're using, let's go. And we'd make the route up on camera. We begin knowing the start location, knowing the end location. And as long as we met those conditions, anything that happened in the chase was the take to use. I mean, I think the longest take we did for a car chase was the Infernus and the Sultan RS chase. I mean, I think we did 4 takes, and it was the final one we used, mainly because of its aggressive style and quite climactic nature. Of course, because the car chase ends with the Sultan RS setting on fire and exploding, and it was just a more cinematic and experiential way again that the scene just happened to play out. And again, it was all improv. And another really notable car chase in my eyes, kept me looking back on it, is the Futo car chase. I mean, the Futo car chase holds a special place in our hearts. It was the only car chase in the film that was done in one take, and it was perfect. Everything that happened, it very much reminded us of the Italian Job or something of that nature. Because it was a dynamic car chase, and it just included us throwing these cheap, small but nimble cars around the nighttime streets of Liberty City. And it felt iconic to us when we shot it, and hopefully in the future we can recreate it, because it would really be an interesting car chase to redo, of course. And now, of course, we get onto the writing process. And the thing I find really interesting is this franchise of ours that has been around now for 8 years, it started off with a film that didn't have a script. There was no script. All we had was a rough outline of what the film was roughly going to be about, some of the scenes we wanted to do. Again, most of it was car chase heavy, so those were kind of filler in a way. And it was just a rough outline. There was no script involved. One of the reasons for that is, A, we were very young. We were very young at the time. We must remember this was 8 years ago, so back in our childhood. We didn't have any experience with writing, with machinima making, with filmmaking, with anything to do with that. I mean, if you watch the film now, you'll know that it's not a good film to watch. It just isn't. The audio's awful. There's no voices. The camera quality is awful. There's no sense of cinematography. It's all done on the game camera. It just isn't a good film to watch. But like I said, it's an integral part of the franchise. It's the origin. It's the baby, if you like. It is what started this entire series. So it's important to look back at it. And the thing that I always find is, interestingly, people always ask, why do you have these old videos? Why do you keep them? And my response is, why remove something that's part of our story? You know, our channel is a story, it's a journey, and some of you guys have been there since the start, some of you have joined us along the way, and what we don't want to do is remove that story, remove the history of the channel. And of course, it would make the franchise incomplete because people couldn't go back and see how we've progressed over the years. What the older films generally like to show now is, this is what we used to be like, and now, after all these years of meeting fantastic people in the machinima community, building up a brilliant, dedicated, amazing fan base who have always been supportive and patient with us, look where we are now, look at our journey, and that is the benefit really of having these older films, especially a film like Bloodgrave. Again, like I mentioned, it didn't have a script, it didn't have a solid story. That is how we did it back then, and I think it shows really, because the film again isn't of great quality, but it is a part of our story, and the film taught us that you need a script, you need more than just an outline. You definitely need some idea of who the characters are, what the main story is, where the ending's going, and all of that kind of writing process. You need that in the production. And so Bloodgrave also taught us some very valuable lessons. And so to wrap up this behind the scenes recap video, we're going to be doing 11 unknown facts about each film. We're going to outline 11 facts that maybe you guys didn't know about, that happened in pre-production, post-production, stuff that didn't make it into the film, and we're going to be doing this for every film in the franchise through our recap series. So I suppose the first thing is, Claudia and Niko's meeting at the end of the film was shot, but it was never put into the film. And there are multiple reasons for this. I mean, the main reason that sticks out really is post-production time was really kind of cutting short, if I remember correctly. The film was shot and we were kind of busy editing it away, and the scene was there, but we didn't have music to put to it. We didn't have that outline of what we wanted the scene to really be, and there was no dialogue as well, which obviously we'll touch on later. So the scene just never got into the film, and it's a shame really, because technically it is the origin of these two main characters meeting together. But of course this was pushed into the next film, The Second Wave, which we'll touch on in the next recap video. The second thing, of course, is that Professor W was going to get introduced, but we ran out of time production-wise. Yes, this is absolutely true. In the original film, there was a scene in the outline where Professor W or someone like Professor W was going to get introduced. I wanted there to be that gadget man, that close friend of Niko in this really dire situation, but sadly we never got around to shooting it, and it's a shame really, because you would expect one of the main characters like that to be in the original film, but sadly, again, like Claudia's situation, Professor W was never introduced, and instead was introduced in the sequel, and again, we'll touch on that in the next recap video. Another interesting fact is that a Bloodgrave reboot was actually written and put into pre-production just a couple of years ago. Now this is absolutely true. We still have the script, we still have the pre-production notes. There was a reboot of Bloodgrave in the works, and I can tell you when exactly it was. It was right after we shot Darklight. Because at that point of the franchise, we were getting into the more personal side of Niko Bellic as a character, and I thought that retelling his origin story in a more updated way, especially using the Rockstar editor at that time, would make sense. And the script is there. We wrote a script. It was way more flushed out. The story was certainly a lot better and a lot more cinematic. Again, I don't want to say anything just in case anything happens in the future with it, but it is there. But sadly, of course, it never happened. And the reason for that is work on Black Phantom immediately began after. It was a couple of weeks after Darklight was released that we started the pre-production process for Black Phantom. So we were doing two things at once. And so sadly, the Bloodgrave reboot never happened. But maybe it'll happen in the future. Who knows? We'll see. We'll see what happens. Of course, something I mentioned earlier is that the fact that there was no script and there's only a brief scene outline in the film. We managed to make a 50-minute film or so with no script. And it's something that I'm kind of proud of and I'm kind of not proud of, because the results definitely show for themselves. But at the same time, again, like I mentioned, it was just a stepping stone. It was a learning tool for us going forward in machinima making. The next unknown fact was that most of the action in the film was improvised, especially the car chases. Now, I mentioned this in the action segment of this recap, but I just want to stress that usually when we go in to shoot action scenes now, they're very coordinated. We know exactly what's happening, we know exactly where the characters are going to be, what's going to happen, the events that are going to happen in the action scenes, and so forth. But with Bloodgrave, there was none of that. There was just, here's the start, here's the end, let's just make sure we get to the end. And whatever happens in the action scene, that's what's going to stick. And it was a really interesting way of making the machinima, but it's something I certainly wouldn't do again. Not to every action scene, at least. The sixth unknown fact was that the film was entirely shot on the iPad, and it was edited with the iMovie app. Hence the shoddy quality of the film. Now, I'm sure that no one is surprised to hear this. If you go back and watch the footage, you can definitely see that it certainly isn't of the best quality, and that's because it was shot on an iPad and it was shot on no budget. We didn't have a game capture recorder like we do now. We didn't have any of the technology that is at our disposal now, and again, we were quite young, so we were still learning. The fact that the film was shot on an iPad and it has this shoddy quality doesn't surprise me, and again, it was just a stepping stone forward, because we realized that if we were going to continue with the franchise after, we needed to up the quality of the next film. And of course, that's what we did. It was the next stepping stone, like I mentioned. Bloodgrave certainly taught us a really important lesson, and so the film, again, in that way, is pivotal. The next unknown fact is that originally there were going to be AI voices, like in Bloodgrave's sequel, but again, production time ran out, meaning we just simply couldn't do it, so subtitles were used instead. Now, sadly, since then, YouTube have updated their system so much now that I don't think you can see the original subtitles on the film, which is a shame because it means it's a silent film. There's no voices, there's no sense of story, there's no sense of dialogue, and it's a massive shame because it is the original film in the franchise, but that is simply how it is. So, like I mentioned, there were originally going to be AI voices. We were going to use them using online text-to-speech software, and again, this never happened because we were just running out of time in the editing suite. So again, it is that learning element of Bloodgrave and its production that really kind of propelled us into the future. We realized in the next film that we were going to have voices because it was just going to be that next step up. Next, interestingly, a teaser poster for the reboot of Bloodgrave was actually created by our GFX editor, Riley Hooper. And you can see this on screen now. It is a brilliant teaser poster and I really loved it. Again, this whole process was put in motion, pre-production was actually going, and yet sadly we never got the chance to use it because of course the film never reached the production stage. However, the poster was made, Riley did an incredible job, and I had to find this one through multiple hard drives that we have. We found it in the end. Here it is. It's a really, really great piece of work, and it just teases that element of mystery and of origin as well that Bloodgrave was originally meant to have, and Riley did an incredible job of completing this. Another interesting fact, of course, is the film was only shot with 3 people. Ewan Ward, a very close friend of mine, of course our stunt director as well, and often our assistant director on some of the previous films. James ZJTW, who that's of course his gamer tag and who was there at the start of the film and he helped us out on a lot of scenes, and of course myself. It was only shot with 3 people, which is amazing to think about because as the films went on and we progressed throughout the entire franchise, more and more people began to get involved in the production process. But at the very start, there was only 3 of us, and I think that's just an incredible element of the film that we managed to make a 50-minute machinima with just 3 people. The 10th fact is Niko's DNA replacement therapy storyline was written in at the last minute, due to our need to explain why Niko's appearance changed from story mode to using online. Yes, this is absolutely true. It was a last-minute decision. We needed a story device to explain why we were using the actual Niko Bellic character, and then when we had to do kind of joint scenes with players to move into the online model. And it was, in my eyes, it was the only workable and believable solution for our story. But in the end it worked because it let us mold the character going into the future, change the character's identity, really, again, create that unique aspect. I mean, there is a reason why he's called Niko Bellic, and of course we'll explain that in just a moment, but it let us create our own alternate universe in the GTA universe, if that makes sense. And again, it really did work. And lastly, and this is arguably the most asked question I think we get in regards to the Agent 11 franchise, is why is our protagonist called Niko Bellic? Well, the 11th unknown fact is that the protagonist is called Niko Bellic because we simply did not know what to call them. Now, of course, I mentioned this in an article with the guys over at Full Throttle Media, who did a brilliant set of articles for us on Black Phantom, and we're still thankful for them to this day. And I mentioned in the article that he's called Niko Bellic because we didn't know what to call them back when we were shooting. Again, refer back to what I said earlier in that we didn't have a script, there was only a story outline. Even the characters were a bit flimsy, we didn't know who they were specifically. And so because of this, part of the film was shot on single player, so we were using the character of Niko Bellic. And then the character's name of Niko Bellic just stuck around, it's what we used. And we thought, well, let's take Niko Bellic out of the GTA 4 story and put him in our own story. So we're using the name, but we're not using his story. And of course, we credit this at every film. If you notice, I think it's onwards from Forevermore, if my memory recalls, that in every opening credit we always title Rockstar's Niko Bellic, because it is Rockstar's Niko Bellic. That was his origin, and we give Rockstar the absolute credit for creating a really brilliant character, and of course his name is identity, and we simply borrowed that and created our own character using that. We've never claimed to be part of the GTA 4 universe, it is simply our own story mode. In a way, it is our own character of Niko Bellic, it's another version. And like I mentioned, yeah, we created our own alternate storyline, our own alternate universe, if you will, where Niko was an FIB agent, having arrived in Liberty City, still illegally of course, and he was then arrested. And then he was offered citizenship and a position within the agency in exchange for his help in bringing down the smuggling operation he resided with. He did so after being sent off to get military training, where he later met Valkyrie. This sadly though was not mentioned in the film, and this storyline is told in Black Phantom. There is of course a flashback scene in Black Phantom that's really pivotal to Niko's storyline and of course the team's itself. That Niko still arrived in Liberty City illegally, was still arrested by the FIB, and from there, that's where our story starts to go away. It starts to kind of deviate a bit. In that Niko was forced into this situation with the FIB, where they said, you will either do this mission for us and we will offer you citizenship and a position in the agency if you do this mission. If you don't, we will arrest you and you will go to prison. And so Niko had no choice. He had to do his mission, but he benefited from it. He got citizenship, he became a citizen, and he learnt the American dream. And this was all in our universe, like I mentioned. The Niko Bellic that we have today, Agent 11, really is completely different to the original Niko Bellic in GTA 4. So I don't want people to get confused on that. It is our own version of Niko Bellic. It's the only reason he's called Niko Bellic is because we didn't have an alternative name for him. So guys, this has been a quite lengthy but in-depth review and recap of Grand Theft Auto Bloodgrave, the first film in the Agent 11 franchise. I want to thank everyone who's watched this film, everyone who has watched this recap, and everyone who stayed with our series and our franchise over the last 8 years. And of course, there's so much more to come. We really cannot wait for you guys to see Grand Theft Auto: The Heir of Scorpio when that releases next July. And of course, between now and then, we're doing these recap videos every month so that you guys can get an idea of the story, the characters, the major storylines, the action, and some unknown facts about the film that you might not have been aware of. So guys, this has been Sam Main. I'm the director of the Grand Theft Auto films. On behalf of all of KnightHunter Studios, I want to thank you for watching. Thank you for sticking with us. If you did like the video, please give it a like and make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube and to follow us on Twitter so you don't miss out on all the latest updates regarding the Agent 11 franchise. Thank you very much for watching, guys, and we'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.